lesson. The reading for that was John chapter 4, 1 through 42. Why, you ask, did I not go in order? Why isn't it chapter 1, chapter 2? Because I didn't want to, so there. But we get to the parts I want to cover, so that's what matters. Yeah. Well, it turns out if you're going to cover a 21 chapter book and 12 lessons, you got to get a little bit creative. So there are just things you have to do. Let's read John 4. We'll read the first 30 verses, and then we'll skip a bit and finish up. And this is the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman, the woman of Samaria. And it's kind of, for the lesson, it's our introduction to who is this Jesus person. Okay? All right, John chapter 4. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. And he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?" For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" So the woman left her water jar, and went away to town and said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" They went out of the town and were coming to him. Skip to verse 39. Many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me all that I ever did." So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. They said to the woman, "It is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world." This is God's word. So, how does the book of John get started? Quite a few personal encounters. That's where we left off last week. Our big point from the first lesson was God is a person. The big underlying meaning of the whole universe is not actually an abstract idea. It's a person who created all things. and that John, in his gospel, is making this pretty wild claim that I met that person. Okay? And so he proceeds to tell you stories then about people who met Jesus. So this is the back up and do it in order part for those of you who like things in order. Okay, back in chapter 1, John the Baptist meets Jesus, John's students meet Jesus, Andrew and Peter meet Jesus, Philip and Nathaniel meet Jesus, right? People just keep meeting Jesus. Chapter 2, he's at a wedding and some people meet Jesus. Then he's at the temple and some people meet Jesus. Chapter 3, a ruler of the synagogue named Nicodemus meets Jesus. And then in chapter 4, this woman meets Jesus. And it's a very lengthy story, right? That was a long reading. There's a lot of very short accounts. If you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, he was passing through Capernaum and he saw somebody and did a miracle, and then he wondered and they went on, right? It's like 3 verses to tell a story like this. John really just digs down. I'm going to tell you the whole story. Here's the nitty-gritty of this encounter. Because the personal encounter is so important to John. That to him, it's not just Jesus did a miracle. Actually, if you read John's gospel, there's a certain lack of miracles. There are some miracles, 7 or so, but the big lists of, and then he did many, many more miracles kind of lists, John culls that down to just a few that he wants to talk about, but he tells you more about them. So he'll tell you more about less, if that makes sense, than the synoptics that tend to just go on and on about lists. The personal encounter is very important. Okay, so what's happening in the story? Jesus is in Samaria. I decided for the purpose of saving page count in the little book, I was trying to keep it short, not to give you the full history of Samaria. What John gives you is enough. He knows that he's writing to people who might not know what the big deal about Samaria is. So what does John tell us about Samaritans in Samaria? This was back in verse 8. No, sorry, verse 9.
They don't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, Jewish folk, typical Jewish folk, don't have anything to do with Samaritans. What is a Samaritan? It's actually hard to answer. If you understand that I'm being pleasantly folksy and not rude, the appropriate word is they were kind of the mutts of the Middle East. Like, by way of ethnicity, to figure out where they come from, they weren't entirely sure. They weren't exactly Gentiles, but weren't quite like the other Jews in the region either. It was a mess. So that's the background. And the way the Jewish folk, the typical Jewish person in Galilee, so we've had a map. Samaria is kind of in the middle, Galilee's in the north, Judea is bottom, okay, south. Well, you had to get from normal Jewish people live down here, and normal Jewish people live up here, and then you got the Samaritans in the middle. So you had to kind of pass through it or go around. And there was a mountain range right there. And they still found it more convenient to go around through the mountains than to go through Samaria most of the time. Even the way John words it here was, and they had to go through Samaria. Right? It was, I guess we'll drive through Samaria. Okay. So he's traveling through Samaria with his students. I went ahead and defined that because I wasn't sure what the people knew. Disciple is just the word student. That's all it means, a learner. And John, our narrator, helpfully explains Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So we have an encounter between Jesus and somebody he's not likely to spend a lot of time talking to. And yet he does. Actually, there's a handful of reasons why he wouldn't be talking to her. The first, the narrator mentions, she's a Samaritan. At the end of the story, down in verse 27, what did the disciples notice? She's a she, right? She's a woman. Yeah, we don't, for an ancient man to just stop and talk to a random woman, kind of odd, right? It's not the protocol of the time and place, apparently. So they thought that was a little strange. If you want to do a little bit of speculation, you know, my view on speculation. Speculation's okay as long as you label it first, right? So I'm going to speculate now, and that's what it is. I could be entirely wrong. But she draws her water at the 6th hour of the day, which is about noon. the typical ancient woman, when do you start your chores? Noon?
Daybreak.
At daybreak. Yeah, the first thing in the morning. So the typical woman went down to get her water for the day at daybreak when the sun came up. Okay. What kind of woman isn't welcome at the well with the other ladies, but finds herself, one with 5 husbands might not be welcome around sunup with the rest of the ladies in town. She makes her way down there at noon. Is that speculative? Very. But it is an interesting detail. How do the ladies around town feel about a woman who's had 5 husbands and with somebody now that wasn't? Had some of those husbands been somebody else's husbands before it was her husband? I don't know. You don't know. You have questions. But it is peculiar that it mentions specifically the time of day she was there and her husbands. It's kind of a weird situation. So she might have been kind of an outcast even among the outcast of Samaria, right? She might not have been popular even among her own folk. And here is a Jewish man. This is a very unlikely encounter, is what we're trying to say. This is an unlikely conversation. The woman is surprised. The disciples are surprised. They don't say anything because they're polite. But the narrator says, I can tell you what they were thinking. They were thinking, this is odd. Okay.
Well, in the story, it's interesting because she's the first individual we know of, because this story is not mentioned in any of
Right.
the Gospels.
Not in Matthew, Mark, or Luke.
And the fact that she is a woman to whom he introduces himself as the Messiah.
Yep. So it's a very thoroughgoing conversation about a very important topic. Compare this. Sometimes it's tricky to compare the Gospels because they're making different points. But to compare to Mark, where Jesus is very hesitant to tell anybody anything. He'll heal somebody and say, don't tell anybody who I am. Right. Keeps it under wraps. But here he's having a very candid conversation about, well, yeah, actually, I am the Messiah. So it's a funny conversation. The unnamed woman, what's her name? She never gets a name, actually. You notice that? 42 verses, never get the name. She's surprised and said as much, right? That somebody would, like him, would talk to her, which led to a conversation.
Well, the second point is that the fact that he tells her this, she has some excitement because she leaves her jug as well.
Yeah,
Runs back into town to tell everybody about it.
yeah,
It kind of has a parallel with Jesus' burial and resurrection. It was women
Yeah.
that brought that news back to the apostles.
yeah. In John, that happens, kind of parallel stories. Yep.
Parallel.
Verses 9 through 18, if we had a whole lot of time and a whole lot more pages, it's a feisty conversation. It's really kind of fun. You're supposed to read it while smiling, I think. I tried. I don't know if I did it right. But she seems a little bit feisty to me. That she's, it's banter, I think is the right word. It's banter. It's kind of like if you could get my phone and see my text messages back and forth with Joy when she asks me Bible questions. We banter. She's always wrong and I'm always right, but we banter a lot. And no, it's not true. We have good it's the kind of conversation I imagine. It's friendly and inquisitive, and that's kind of the way that this plays out. And I don't know. I don't take it to be like she's dewy-eyed, or doe-eyed, just staring up and, oh, sir, give me this water. I think it's, yeah, that'd be great. Give me some of that water that never runs out. I wouldn't have to come down here anymore. Again, it's a little bit feisty, maybe even a little sarcastic. She's not an immediate believer who says, oh, you're the Messiah. We have to get there. Okay? But by the time you get to verse 19, after he does the bit about, go get your husband, you notice she has lots to say until that moment, and it's the shortest sentence she has, right? All kinds of commentary. Give me your husband. I don't have a husband. Period. Real short. He hit on a sensitive topic. Okay? And to which Jesus says, you're right about that. And that's when she says, okay, I'll go this far. You're a prophet. Colin?
Just a speculation might be good for us.
As long as you label it. Yes.
That's right. Might be good for us to recognize that there's a lot here we don't see, and think about how you can tell someone something that can sound like you're trolling them or you're attacking them. However he did it, she doesn't seem to have taken offense.
It is the most impressive of the things that Jesus does in his ordinary life. Let me say, not talking about miracles, but in his ordinary life, the things he gets away with saying to people who still like him afterwards, and the way he does it. You could say those exact same words and get slapped in the face, and he does it better. And there is something there that Christians have got to learn in an age of vitriol and partisanship and angry screeds on Twitter and Facebook. The ability to say something honest, but to say it well and in a way that makes people smile at the end. It's a gift. I think it might be a gift you could learn, though. We could get better at it. And Jesus is so remarkable. There's a great debate, you can go find it on YouTube or something, between Christian mathematician John Lennox and Richard Dawkins, one of the world's most infamous atheists. And Dawkins gets there and he's ready to hate a Christian. I mean, he is there in full atheistic, angry glory, ready to hate. And by the end of the debate, Lennox has this great Irish voice, and he's lilting jokes all the way through. By the end, they're laughing and cutting up back and forth, and you think they were buddies. They had a second debate, just because they enjoyed talking to each other, right? Lennox does this wonderful job of not letting him hate him. He just being a pleasant person, and he's candid. He's defending the existence of God. He just does it well, and that's something that Jesus does. So that when we get to this part, he's already told her she's a sinner. Right? And she's still talking to him. It's kind of amazing when you think about it in that way. Now, if we stopped right there, and we could, right? Be shorter.
There's a parallel here between her conversation with him in that mode and his conversation with Nathaniel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if I saw you under the tree over there.
Same
Yeah.
thing, I saw you under
Yeah.
And then he's telling her something that no one else knows. Except
Or at least he should know.
At least the people in Samaria.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's discovering something or disclosing something that
Yep.
No one else probably knew.
And that's what she repeats when she goes to town. He told me everything I ever did. Right? It's shocking. So like I said, if we stopped right here, and we could, this would be a good religious tale. If you were starting a religion, this makes for a good story. Prophet comes to town, meets a random stranger, tells them their past, future, destiny, whatever, tells them something they could possibly know. Some ordinary citizen discusses religion with our hero. Her life is thereby improved or her knowledge increased. The end. That'd be a great story. That's a good religious tale. Okay? If this happened to Muhammad or to the Buddha or, you'd say, that makes for a good story. I like it. That's kind of compelling. It's interesting then that that's not where this story leaves off, because that's not the point that John's actually making. That this is just an interesting prophet. When she says, I perceive you're a prophet, we're only halfway through it. Because to know Jesus is to know a lot more than that. So it's Jesus himself then who turned the conversation from religious doctrine to something else about God. So see, watch what happens if you look at it again. Verse 16, he brings up the husband. And then they get around to, I perceive you're a prophet in verse 19. Does she want to talk about her husband some more? Verse 20, she says, this is a good time for me to switch to a religious topic. Is this a topic that has come up anywhere in the conversation up till now? No, right? There's things you're not supposed to talk about, politics and religion. Before that are your ex-husbands, right? That in lieu of that conversation, I'd actually rather talk about religion and politics. So she brings up a perfectly good religious question. Here's one Jews and Samaritans argue about. Tell me now, you guys worship over there and we worship over here. And again, there's some great history here. They have their own mountain, and they have kind of a pseudo-temple built there. This goes back to like history that stems out of the story of Nehemiah. I mean, it's a remarkable tale, okay? But she just asked it as a long-standing, century-old question. You guys worship over here, we worship over here. Both of us think we're religiously right. Which one is it? And Jesus kind of answers the question. he does say, well, again, how does he get away with this? I don't know. You Samaritans don't know what you're talking about. Right? It's kind of blunt, right? Actually, we're right on that one. But then he says that's not the point. He wants to tell you about God. God is seeking worshipers, and pretty soon it's not going to matter which mountain you're standing on. Okay? So, what again we get out of this, what we got on the first lesson, there is a God. Sometimes he appears to be hidden, but he wants to be known. What does Jesus turn this conversation towards? I want to show you about who God is. He's spirit, he is to be worshipped, and he's actively seeking worshipers. See, that's a point about God, not just about a particular of religious doctrine one way or another. The identity of God is where he takes the conversation. The hour is coming, is now here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So, you don't normally run into God while going to the well for water or on the way to the supermarket. And what John is telling you is, except one time this lady did. She ran into someone who was God himself come to reveal himself in some unique way that she wasn't prepared for. Right? That she was willing even to go as far as, I guess you might be a prophet. Maybe you could answer my religious question. But he doesn't even stop there, and he keeps pushing the action further. So I think this is her trying to say, I guess we're done talking. You know, there's some sentences that you do that with. When somebody says, well, we've all got different opinions, that usually means we're done talking now. Right? That's a very polite way to say, hush. Okay. I know when Messiah gets here, he'll tell us everything, I guess. I think that was a polite way of ending the conversation. Like, it was kind of a throwaway line. That both the Samaritans and the Jews, apparently, agreed on this point in some way. I don't know how much they agreed on, but enough that she could say this as just kind of a throwaway remark. Someday, that person is coming. We call him Messiah. I don't know if this is her or if this is John giving you a footnote. By the way, you probably don't know what Messiah means, so it means Christ. I don't know which one is speaking there, because there's no quotation marks in ancient manuscripts. You got to guess a little bit. So either she says, which by the way means Christ, like she's reading an encyclopedia article, or John the narrator says, by the way, that's where the word Christ is coming from. So Messiah, which is Christ, yeah, when he gets here, he'll tell us all things. Okay. Kind of throw it, I guess I've heard that one in conversations too, a little differently. Hey, I guess one of these days when we get to judgment, we'll all figure it out. It's kind of a throwaway line. Like, I'm not expecting to get there today, but I'd like you to stop talking to me. So, one of these days, I guess we'll all know. When Messiah comes, like, it's a true statement. It's just not stated with a lot of urgency. Like, she's not saying, boy, any second now we'll know. It's, when Messiah comes. So in Jewish thought, and apparently Samaritan thought, it was believed that a man would someday come who would bring to fruition all the goodwill of God for his creation, Israel, the whole thing. It's a vague promise. It's not something that they all agreed on and could nail down. Different people, different schools of thought of kind of which passages were about this or that. But by the time you get to the first century, there's a view that's alive and well in the documents we have from first century literature, even beyond the New Testament, that Jewish people had this idea that, there's someone coming. Our prophets told us someone's coming, and he's going to fix things. He's a chosen servant. He's going to right every wrong and let people see for the first time, what God really doing in the world. All that kind of wild, crazy language in Isaiah at the end of the book, he's going to do all that stuff. Okay, and maybe not any more specific than that, but they knew that. The man was known to the people as Messiah, a term of Hebrew origin, meaning anointed. In the Greek text of the New Testament, this becomes Christos, which for us is Christ. So, believe it or not, Christ isn't Jesus' last name. It's a title that's being applied to him. He is this person we've been waiting for, the one God picked to fix things. Okay, so that's what she says. One of these days, that fella God picked, I guess he'll fix it, and he'll tell us which mountain to stand on. Okay, I think we're done with this conversation. followed by one of the coolest sentences ever, but I don't want to get there yet. So just wait for just a second. Okay. What I think is fascinating is that whatever time in history you're in, we're all kind of hopeful that there is some solution to the problem. I've never met anyone of any worldview, religion, non-religious, who said everything is exactly right the way it is. Everything's perfect. Like everyone is pretty much in agreement being human is pretty messed up. There are some great things and there are some terrible things about it. Sickness happens, death happens, poverty happens, hunger happens, and on we could go. Okay. And throughout history, people have had different ways of saying, well, you know, the problem is this, and here's the solution. Okay. I think I mentioned last week, back in December, I finished up a seminar on world religions. Religion is a really hard word to define, actually. But one of the better definitions is, it's when somebody says, here's the disease and here's the cure. Now you got a religion. Every religion is based on the idea, here's the problem in the world and here's the solution. So if you're Buddhist, human material existence and suffering is the problem. The way to get past that is to break the cycle of material and meditate into a blissful state beyond materiality, where you're not suffering anymore because you're disconnected from the material. Okay. So what's the problem? The disease is being physical and suffering, human suffering. The cure is meditating and enlightenment past that. Okay. Disease, cure. Islam, the problem is that humanity does not reverence and submit to God. The cure is to create a system of perfect submission to God. The word Islam means submission, right? If we could just completely submit to God, that would fix everything. So if you wonder why so many rules in Islam and why are they so kind of agitated about keeping them, that's the disease and the cure. We haven't reverenced God. We'll fix that. Okay. And there are different views on how Islam intends to fix that, depending on which strain of Islam you're in. Some through peaceful engagement, others through violence, right? Same idea, though. That's what a religion is, right? Here's the diagnosis, here's what's wrong with you, here's the cure. Okay. I just said that. For Eastern religions like Buddhism, the disease was human suffering. The cure was escape from the physical body and material existence. If you're an ancient Greek, the problem was a poorly lived life. Well, you just wasted your life. We can fix that. Read a philosopher. Read Aristotle, read Socrates, read Plato, and you'll figure out how to correctly live your life, and then your life will have meant something. Adopt a philosophy. You can be an Epicurean or a Stoic or whatever. Pick one. Do something. Okay. In the modern world, we still do it. We just stopped calling it religion. Religion is what those old folkies do. But know what we do? We still have a disease and we still have a cure. Okay? Human ignorance. We'll fix it. We got science. Scientific method will lead us to perfect knowledge. That'll fix it. We even have a whole period of history called the Enlightenment. Right? We're going to let everybody know things. We're going to know things. Medicine. And that's literally, we trust medicine to diagnose what's wrong with the world. COVID-19. That one's easy. What's the solution? This vaccine we made and some masks and some stuff and the doctors and all that, right? Literally, we're identifying, here's the disease. We'd all be okay if we could get rid of that, and here's the thing that'll fix it. Okay, we trust medicine to do that. I'm not even saying it's a bad idea. Government, okay? Poverty and injustice in the world. Who should fix it? Government can, right? Economics. If we could just fix the economy and everybody had enough money, no one would fight anymore. They're only fighting because there's poverty and economic disparity. That's kind of Marxism in a nutshell, actually. It's a constant war between the haves and the have-nots. Okay? If we could just fix the economy, everybody'd be okay. Mental health. Okay. I like all of these things, by the way. None of them are bad, but there are people that are kind of sold to the religion of mental health, that everybody's problem is just not understanding themselves well enough, and if they could get that sorted out, fix everything. Okay? See, with the issue, we're still doing it. We just don't call it religion anymore. But we're all trying to say, you know what's really wrong with the world, and here's what will fix it. The Hebrew Scriptures do the same thing, much better answer. They agreed that suffering was a problem, but they treated suffering as a symptom of the true disease, human sin and rebellion against God. When when humans didn't recognize their Creator in that relationship, things got squirrely, and you experienced that as suffering and death, pestilence, whatever. But the problem was further down. It was about morality. And those scriptures insisted that the solution to all these things was the same person who created all. That God was going to have to fix it. That there wasn't a human cure for the disease. See the difference? We are part of the disease. We're part of the problem. We need God to bring in a cure. Okay? In our story, then, the Samaritan woman believed that someday, somehow, God would send Messiah, whom we call Christ, and he would do that, right? He was the cure. Okay? This is kind of the far-off Jewish hope. But for her, it's mostly a cliche, right? One of these days, yeah, I guess God will fix it. Why does it become a cliche? Because if you say it often enough and you keep suffering, it's hard to take it very seriously. Yeah, Messiah will come one of these days. It'll all get better. Okay. And then you get the coolest line in the story, which I made you wait for. I who speak to you am he. Who's got their King James Bible? It's even cooler in the King James. I who speaketh to thee am he. Like it's a pirate. It's fantastic. It's like every pronoun you can possibly use in one sentence. I who speak to you am he. Right? I, the person standing here, talking to you, the person in front of me, second person, is the mysterious man you've been waiting for all your life. It's a really cool sentence. And again, it's short to the point, like everything else John does. He tells these windy stories and then just punchline. That what Jesus is claiming is he himself is the cure of the disease. That you don't even know. And he said that more than once now. You're thirsty? I've got the water. Right? It's the same point. You can pick the problem. Jesus is the solution. I who speak to you am he. Okay. So what is the Christian claim? Why would I use this story for a lesson to talk about the Christian doctrine of who Jesus is? Jesus, the person standing in front of her, was making all things known, setting all wrongs right. That's what Christians are claiming. That he, that person, is the answer. Not something he brings to us, like he's going to hand us a present. Here it is. It doesn't happen apart from himself. He himself, the person, is the solution. Jesus, the person, portrayed for us in John's Gospel, succeeds today where every other cure has failed. Now, in fact, back to Tom's point, you got ahead of me. I had a slide. Now the woman, when that claim is made, now she's dropping her water jar and she's running for town. Right? And she even states it as a question, can this be Christ? I mean, it's still a ridiculous claim. That one day you're getting water and there he is, the cure for all the problems in the universe. And he asks you for a drink of water. I mean, it's still a crazy claim. But you're kind of stuck with it because he's just that remarkable. Okay? And it turns out this scene replays itself again and again in John's Gospel. Wherever Jesus goes, somebody kind of has this light bulb moment of, oh, this is the one who could actually make it right. In chapter 7 is a good example. 3 chapters down the road, rumors about Jesus are now kind of running rampant, right? He's done enough in the early sections of his ministry that people kind of know his name, and opinions vary about who he is. So here's chapter 7, 11, and 12. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, well, where is he? That's a curiosity question. They don't know what to think of him, just want to see him. And there was much muttering about him among the people. Okay. While some said, he's a good man, others said, no, he is leading the people astray. Okay, so what are the range of claims about Jesus? Worst case, he's a charlatan and a fraud. Right? What's best case scenario in these people's mind? He might be a decent human being. That's about as far as they're willing to go. Maybe he's a good guy. Maybe he's a good teacher, you know. You might like him if you know him. That's best case scenario. He might be a good man. Now watch what happens after they meet him. Big conversation, verses 14 to 24, and then here's the response. Some of the people of Jerusalem therefore said, "Is not this the man whom they seek to kill? And here he is speaking openly, and they say nothing to him. Can it be that the authorities really know this is the Christ?" But it goes from, at best he's a good person, from, why are they trying to kill him? Could he be who he says he is? Could they know it? Verse 31 of the same chapter, yet many of the people believed in him, and they said, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done? In other words, what's the threshold? What would it take to convince me? Is there anything that someone else could do that would be more compelling than what this man has done? What would it take to convince me? See how quick that shift happened? It's the same as with the woman. From, yeah, sure, give me that water, to leaving her water and running and telling. And they go from, he might be a good person, probably a crook, to, I can't even imagine Christ would do more than this when he gets here. That's what happened when people meet Jesus. And that's the significance of what we claim about Jesus in Christian faith. Chapter 12, you get to the scene where Jesus enters Jerusalem in the last week of his life. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." Hosanna, another one of those words we don't know. Hosanna means save us. So what has to happen for a man who at best is a good fellow to then have people throwing him a parade and saying, "Save us. Whatever the disease is, you're the cure." That's a huge claim. And that's what happens everywhere Jesus goes. So our point, wrap up, and we'll discuss it a little bit. In the end, we also have a choice to make about this man they called Christ. No one who ever met him came to doubt his significance. Okay. No one, 0 people who ever met Jesus walked away and said, me. No one walked away saying, he's kind of dull. People walked away and wanted to kill him. People walked away and wanted to worship him. But no one walks away saying he's kind of dull. No man in history has ever influenced that much just by walking into town. And that's the Christian claim about Jesus, that he really is that person. Okay, some discussion questions. Let's start with number 1, and then we'll make our way down. We'll do it in order. I talked about the disease and the cure. While I was talking about that, did you think of anything in your life that you have treated as the cure for what ails you? Like, where in your experience do you actually put trust to make things better? It's a tough question on purpose, so I'll let you think about it.
I'll put my trust in the Word of God as it is the Holy Word of God.
Well, that's the right answer, but you're cheating. That's the right answer, right? In practice, we don't often do that. I mean, that's where we're headed. That's what we're trying to get to, right? God and His Word and what He's taught us is where we put our trust. In practice,
Mental and physical ability.
yeah, am I physically strong enough? Am I smart enough to accomplish it? So I put my trust in myself. I can fix this problem. All right, science will fix it. There's got to be a gadget for that. Colin?
Well, not to start a rabbit to chase,
Here it
but
goes.
one of the things that occurs to me is there is not an agreed to definition of what is right.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, the health and wealth gospel. Well, if you're right with God, then everything's going to be cool in your life.
Yeah.
As opposed to you will always have trial and tribulation. So it's how you define what right is.
So we haven't even decided what's wrong. We definitely haven't decided what would fix it. Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you what I was thinking. Let me see if I can lead you to where I was headed, because I wrote this in the fall. I was putting the finishing touches on it at the end of October and the beginning of November. What happens at the beginning of November where everyone says, that'll fix it? Yeah, right? That we trust that if we could just get the right guy in office, that would just fix it, right? And we do it every 4 years, regardless of outcome, regardless of party. Every 4 years we say, that'll fix it. When we're honest,
Some
has
would
it
say-
ever fixed it?
Some would say that the guy that lost, if he'd have won, it would have been all right.
That's every 4 years. There's a group that says our guy got it and he's going to make it right, and there's a group that says, boy, if we'd have just had ours, it'd have been better. And we do it every 4 years, ma'am.
And the sad thing with that is, when you ask that question, what have you put your trust in, we tend to think of it as, what do those Samaritans, what do those other people who are not
Those folks.
Christians, because we all put our faith in God and trust in God because that's the right answer.
Yeah.
But look at multiple peoples within this congregation's Facebook page.
Yeah.
And you see, no, a lot of us are putting faith in politics.
Yeah. So with
Well,
that,
either way, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter which way.
if Facebook is any indication,
Yeah.
most of us have our confidence in something else. A fair number of us do. And I fall guilty to it as often as anybody. Again, that I get enamored with an idea or a person or a candidate or a concept or a development and say that's going to do it. And I forget that there's been a couple of those in the course of human history, and here we are. Right?
I kind of agree with Joanna, that do we really believe that?
Yeah.
That do we really believe what's on the Facebook page or what we put down on Facebook or what we say about the physical environment in which we live?
Well,
We argue about it.
Yeah. Ma'am,
I don't know if you really wanted to go this deep into this, but like what Alan
here goes
said,
that rock
that
rabbit.
but that definition of what is right or not. A conversation with a friend of mine sharing a conversation, a second conversation, where the comment was made, your Jesus is not the same as my Jesus. And that was an eye-opening statement of what is your perception of Jesus and what would be right and how would he truly be on this planet, which we have back to the scripture. We know what he would be,
Yeah.
but our own vision gets in the way
Yeah.
so much. Our 5 husbands get in the way.
Did you
Yeah.
say, you're right and he's wrong?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so based on that then,
No.
this difficulty of Jesus is supposed to be what it's all about. So do you maybe get an answer to number 2? Why might stories of personal encounters, at least in John's Gospel, be better than just listing doctrines about Jesus?
Because it personalizes it.
It personalizes it, okay? And that's key. Let me be clear. Nothing wrong with listing a good set of doctrines, right? All for it, okay? I've got a few doctrines myself. I like them real good. But ultimately, the Christian faith, you turn to page 1 of the New Testament, and it doesn't start with, here are the doctrines. It starts with 4 accounts of the life of a person and people that met him. And for that matter, if you read the Old Testament, I know there are big chunks of it that feel like, oh, here comes the doctrines. But there's actually a pretty good chunk, even of what we call the books of law, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. A pretty good chunk of that is stories of people. And then interspersed in that are, okay, by the way, here's some rules. But a lot of stories get woven into that. And that seems to be an important detail.
Now I can shoot the rabbit I turned loose. Because the world is never going to be right, but what is right is being perfected in kingdom living, which is a subheading under what Janice said about this, because it is people, it is personal.
Yeah.
And it should stand without regard to the wrongness of the world.
Yeah, Yeah.
We're not of the world.
yeah,
We're strangers on this planet.
yeah,
We are not of the world. That's the thing. We are living of the world, but when we are His, we're not of the world. We're
Yeah.
just sojourners on this world.
yeah. Yeah,
What Colin is doing, and James says, if anyone thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit the orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So that kingdom living, that's what that sounds like to me.
Well, John's gospel, he starts off in the beginning, but there's a key word he uses in those first 9 verses
mm-hmm,
of chapter 1. And that key word is the word light.
okay,
And he goes ahead to say in chapter 8, I am the light of the world.
yeah,
But people love darkness. And the darkness keeps them from having the light in their hearts because their heart is dark. And we have to be careful, I think, in the same way that we have to realize, as Joanne said, we're not a part of this world. And the reason probably for that is we had the opportunity they didn't have then, because the only Bible they had was the Old Testament. And the Old Testament mentions light a lot of times,
Mhm.
all the way through. Job particularly. Every other verse or so and all through Job is light. And Jesus identifies himself as that first verse in John.
Mhm.
I am the light of the world.
yeah.
And he who comes to me will not have darkness in their heart.
So even that claim, I mean, see how he personalized that? Again, it's not, any Star Wars fans, there's the light, and there's the dark side, right? And there are these abstractions of, well, these folks are kind of like this, and those folks are kind of like that, and you make choices